What?
No, no. Got on
Okay, so the truth is I don't even have, I printed you another chapter because I wanted to go quickly through the first one. But then as I was driving over, I said I should have brought the first one because there are a few more things that I wanted to do there.
I have it.
I think everybody does, but I can use the Hebrew, it's not so terrible. Okay. Okay, so we talked a lot about how love is a creative force. The next thing that we want to discuss is that love has actually three different types of manifestation. It manifests in three different ways. We call them faith and selflessness and love. So love is actually the final, most mature manifestation of the same power. So the big issue in Torah is, how can I bring everything back to one? How can I show that everything really is merely different manifestations of the same one force, of the same Hashem Echad? We started out when we said that love is Or HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the light of Hashem. So the light of Hashem, the way it's described in Pnimius Torah, it goes through stages of revelation and manifestation, how it manifests in the soul. So when we talk about love being a creative force and being something that's driving everything, then we can see that it makes sense to talk about it at different stages of maturity, if you want. Okay, so it's like it goes through three stages of maturity. And here we're not talking necessarily about love between spouses, we're talking about every type of love. Each of the different types of love that we discussed. Because we're talking about it as a distinct force in the soul. So when love starts out, it's faith. And actually, what you experience it's hard to call it love. Instead, we call it faith. Emunah. And then, as it matures some more, it becomes the power of selflessness. It develops some more and becomes the power of selflessness. And finally, when it's fully mature, it becomes love itself. Okay?
At what stage is it a sickness?
I think at the last one. Cholat Avani. Let's take a different example of how to use the same idea. And then I think this one is more clear, and then we'll understand it. When the child is born, all he is a nefesh. Nefesh just means he's alive. The life just means it's survivable. It's a living being, but there's not very much there. You can say behind everything is this power of the infinite, the soul, and so on. But the soul right now is only manifesting, it's only appearing as just the simple nefesh. Nefesh means life. It's the fact that it's alive. As it matures some more, the nefesh becomes ruach. It becomes spirit. What does it mean that it becomes spirit? That he begins to talk. That's the next major stage. So that's why, also one of the reasons why the sages, they say that in the first few years, the first 2 years, the child is called a suckler, a yonik. Yonik means that he's only taking in. but he can't give anything out yet. But at age 2, which is the end of the suckling stage, he begins to, it's like he converts the what he ate, and it turns into some kind of spirit. And the spirit is his talking spirit, his ability to talk, to make words. Speech is the second manifestation of the soul. It's much more complex than the first one. The first one is just to be alive. The second one is that you can already speak. But to be able to speak is not yet the full manifestation of the soul. When do you get to the full manifestation? When you come to neshama. Neshama, what does neshama mean? So literally it means breath. But in terms of development, the stage of neshama is the stage of thought. It's when you come to the place of thought. So you can see that these are like three different garments of the soul. From action, which is just being alive, the nefesh, to dibur, that's the second one. And finally, to machshava, to thought. So on the face of it, you would think maybe these are not dependent on one another. So in a certain sense, they're not really dependent, but they're chronologically dependent. Meaning that first you get the first manifestation of the soul is just the action, just being alive. Then when the soul matures some more, it can speak. And when it can mature even more, it can begin to think. So in the same way, when we talk about love as a creative force, or as a binding force, as something that connects things together, so there are 3 stages of how love appears in a person's life. And the first stage is faith. It's the simplest. That's like being just animate, just being alive. In the second stage, love already becomes selflessness. And finally, in the end, it becomes what we call love, what we define as love. Okay? So this is like a description of development. You could almost look at a person's development and chart it based on how they love and how they attach to things. So what does it mean to attach to something through faith? Okay. What kind of attachment is that? Is that a strong attachment or a weak attachment? So we don't really define it as strong or weak. We define it as how mature it is. That faith is immature. It's true. There's something about faith, not just something, everybody knows what it means. It's like there's nothing that can move you. It's very immature. It's just, is it powerful though? Is it a powerful type of attachment? It's the strongest there is. It's very interesting that actually the first stage is a very, very powerful type of attachment. Attaching through faith, that I say that I have faith in something. For instance, a lot of Jews will say, I'm not a practicing Jew, but I have faith. But ani ma'amin. So what are they saying? They're saying, I love Hashem, but my relationship with Him is very immature. But because it's so immature, it's actually almost unshakable. You almost can't break it. Okay? If I...
Because it's not depending on what you do.
Right. You almost don't need to do anything, if at all. So we describe this as a point. Like that the first stage of every developmental process is called a point. And a point is unbreakable. It's very hard to break a point. It has no dimensions, it has no weight, it has nothing. It's just there. By the way, when people, unfortunately this becomes, you said which stage is where you're sick with love. So there's a sickness in the first stage, in loving like a point with faith, that it only feels like faith. It's almost like somebody has love at first sight. So what is that? How do you know that you would enjoy being with this person? Maybe what you're attracted to is all the wrong things.
The flash.
Okay, it's a flash. It's not. It's like we said. It's a baraka mavri kol hasechel. It's like a lightning flash. Who said that would be somebody that you could actually build love with? What you have is faith, actually. You have like this faith, and it's unfounded, not necessarily very founded, not necessarily with good, with a lot of data, that this is something that I love. And who said? How do you know? Maybe you hate it. You just think you love it. Obviously, it's an immature relationship, but it's very strong. Because if it sparks, the point here is like a spark. If it sparks and a person's taken by it, it's almost unbreakable. So one of the things that leads people to difficulty in marriage is exactly this, that they have a memory of this spark, and when it came to actually maturing love through its different stages, from this very, call it lightning-like type affinity that comes up in a person's mind, and now they actually have to manifest it, they have to mature it, they find it that it doesn't work so easily. But they have this longing that it came from that point, from that faith, from that original moment. And so, yeah. And it's not just, as I said, it's not just between people. Sometimes, a person's taken in by a Rav that they hear. And then they actually try to become close to them. And as they get closer, they realize, wait a minute, we're not really on the same wavelength. And it's impossible to be with this person. He drives me nuts. And so it's it can be in a relationship between a Rav and a student. It can be in a teacher and a student. It can be in a relationship between spouses. Where it doesn't happen so much, although it can also happen, is between siblings also. There, you would almost say that the siblings have, by definition, this love-like faith, that they have this love that is like a point, like a faith, and they don't realize that even there, you have to grow it, you have to make it mature. It won't mature just by itself. Even though by siblings, like I said, because it's natural love, it'll grow almost by itself. But not necessarily. After you reach a certain age, it's very interesting. You would say almost that the love recedes back to the faith, back to a point-like state. That when you become adults, you don't live near each other and you don't really have any connection. So you still have that point-like affinity, but you can't mature it into speech and into even thought. It won't work that way. You can't mature it into selflessness and into actual love, and how love manifests. It becomes a very difficult task. The same thing is this between man and God. Same thing, that there is a point of affinity, this point of love, which we call faith, and it can make you do certain things at certain times, but that's not the same at all as living a mature type of love, which demands maybe even your whole being, right? This point, what's good about it is that you carry it inside your heart somewhere, and it doesn't bother you that much. And you can always say, I have faith. I love Hashem because I have faith. And really, you mean that. It's not an empty statement, but it's not really love. It's actually faith. It's just a point that hasn't really developed, and it's very difficult. So between husband and wife, it's much more than that. There you see all the stages that love has to go through. This whole, from point to line to area, from what we're calling faith to selflessness to actual love. It's a very difficult process. It's not easy at all. Right? On the other hand, you can look at it another way and say, let's take somebody who There was a book that was written 15 years ago. I think it was called Outliers. I don't remember which one. Malcolm, whatever his name is. He's a journalist who writes really good books, sociological books. And one of his topics was, how do people like Bill Gates become Bill Gates or Steve Jobs? How do they become who they are? How does this happen? And so he came up with this thing, or other people came up, and he made it popular, of this 10,000 hour rule. I think we've mentioned it before, which basically means that for you to become a master of anything, you need to dedicate 10,000 hours of your life to it, which is it's a large amount of time. So if somebody by age 20 is already a master in something, that pretty much means that somehow they put in 3 hours every day for the past 10 years, which is almost mind-boggling when you think about it. It's an incredible feat. So that's like the investment in the selflessness. But what's missing from that description is what sparked them. What got them so interested in whatever this thing is that they were willing to dedicate so many hours to learning this craft, whatever it is, be it computer programming or being an artist or dance or music, playing an instrument. What sparks that? That's the love at first sight. That's something that the first time you saw it, you imagine yourself, you believe that you would find yourself in that place. Meaning that you would find yourself in the sense of limtzot, like to find who you are. You would find yourself if you were engaged in that. That's the spark. And if you didn't get that spark, nothing in the world would make you go through the 10,000 hours. There's nothing that could do. Because 10,000 hours means, actually, that you must be what we call selfless. Meaning you have to get into a place of selflessness to dedicate so much time to something. And then people say it's a labor of love. Yes, you're right, it's a labor of love. But if there's no love in the beginning, this spark, which really is faith, because it's not love, it's not mature love, you have no idea that it's going to take 10,000 hours or whatever amount of time it is, and you have no concept really of what it's going to be like to live in that place yet. What is the life of a musician like? Let's say you fell in love with music and you decided to spend the amount of time needed to become a concert violinist.
Practice.
So the practice is the line stage, is the selflessness stage, and then the love is when you actually get to do what you love. You get to live there in that place where what you're doing is you're playing in front of audiences and you're going all around the world maybe and this and that. And you sort of know what that is, but you don't really. Because you'll only fully understand that when you actually get into that place and start living that way. And so you can't really imagine what it will be like. But so in the beginning you've got this spark, this faith, and faith, like we know, is a picture of what? Past, present, or future? Future. The spark is always a morsel of the future that suddenly came into you now. And that spark, that point of faith, it's really promise, if you want. It's not really promise. Promise is more the second stage, but it has promise to it. It's like this will develop. It will be something. When you look at a baby, that's basically what you're looking at. You're looking at promise. You're looking at potential. You're not really looking at anything. You're looking at, and as Bill Cosby used to say, false advertising, right? Because it seems to you that what this will develop into is such a charming bundle of humanity, and yet as you go through the selfless, the stages that require selflessness, then you suddenly realize, wait a minute, between the point and the area and the life and the actual love, so there's this huge gap that requires so much of my energy that if I would have known, maybe I wouldn't even have gotten into it. Like the whole thing is just very, very difficult. So you have to see whether, like when somebody's going to choose an occupation, whatever it is, do you get that spark? Do you get that point of faith that you have faith in this endeavor, whatever this is, that this is good for you? It's the same thing with people. Somebody who's going to get married, so you're right, you can never in 4 or 40 or 4,000 dates figure out what it's going to be like to live together.
It's always different.
So, by definition, even people who have lived together before they got married, afterwards they figure out that, wait a minute, it's different when you are not committed and after you are committed. It's like a completely different thing. Even though it's like the same two people, they've been living together for who knows how long.
So our love for Hashem, is that something that He put into us, or that we...
So in a certain sense, to put into is almost the wrong language. He doesn't put it into us. It's rather that we all have a sense of what our final state is. Meaning, it's not that Hashem put the point into me and because of that, I developed through the whole process of love. It's almost the other way around. It's because my final being, the way I see myself finally matured and so on, is connected to Hashem. It's because of that I, in the beginning, have a point of faith. It's because in the end, I see myself that love will win. Again, that I'll really be living, right? We said that in English, it's very close. Love and life. They're almost the same word, come from the same background.
I heard it said that "V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha." How can Hashem command us to love Him?
You can't.
Because it's in our DNA.
That's one possibility. Yeah. But the Baal Shem Tov says that it's, and not just the Baal Shem Tov, everybody who studied this said in the end this is not a command, it's a promise.
You will.
You will love. Ve'ahavta. You will love. Okay? You have to read it right. It sounds the same, whether you say ve'ahavta, meaning I'm commanding you, and you say ve'ahavta, and you will love, it's the same word, there's no real difference. Really, in correct Hebrew, you can't say ve'ahavta as a command. It really doesn't work. As a command, you have to say ehov. Ehov et Hashem Elokecha. And it doesn't say that. That's the really correct grammatical form. So really, it doesn't even start, the whole idea that this is a command. And yet, we know that there's a mitzvah to love Hashem. So there must have some source. Same way it says, Ve'ahavtem et hager, that you should love the Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So one way of looking at it is that it's a command, and the command is supposed to make you go through the stages. Another way of looking at it is simply that is the final stage. And because the final stage is one of love, it starts from faith. So this also means that to come to Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, this is the Baal Shem Tov was very big on, he says, for me to come to love another Jew, I have to have faith in them. So one of his biggest teachings, that you can't come to love someone if you don't have faith in them. And this is especially true about Jews. Because you have such high expectations. You have such a picture of what the ahava will look like, what it will be like to live in a state of love with them, that it's almost definite that whatever they do or you do, you'll seem to fall short. And so you have to have a ton of faith in the beginning, this point of faith that will start driving the process forward. and be able to take you, to carry you all the way there. So in this sense, the point line area, meaning the developmental stages of love, are very simply, they're faith, selflessness, and love itself.
This is how Hashem loves us.
Right, he starts, right, and that's how he started with Avram. Avram was just the point. The point is unshakable. It's very, very strong. His connection with Avram is just incredibly strong. There's nothing that can move it. Ve'emin ba'Hashem because Avram believed in Hashem, so Hashem considered it a kindness from Avram, and that was it. He was hooked. He can't disconnect anymore. But then the long process after that of getting to the actual state of love, which is how Avram lives, that requires a tremendous amount of selflessness in the end. In between. What is the selflessness like in between? We know that the person who teaches us, so Avram teaches us the faith, and whom we learn the selflessness from, this process. And this is a very interesting idea, that selflessness is like a line, right? Because we have point, line, and area. These are like the developmental stages in geometry. So that's what they're called in Kabbalah. But so the faith is like a point, selflessness is like a line. Moshe Rabbeinu is like a line. What do we mean by line? So whenever you say there's a straight line, you mean that there is a goal.
Shortest distance between.
Okay, you're going somewhere. Okay, it's a distance. Meaning, selflessness, love in its stages, selflessness is like motivation. In the first stage, when it's like a point, there's no motivation. It doesn't motivate you to anything. In fact, there's people who they say, I have faith in Hashem, and I'm fine. It doesn't motivate me to do anything. Faith doesn't have to motivate you at all. Faith, because it's so permanent and strong, so you can just sit there and wait. Who knows for what? One of the best parables for this in the natural world is the butterfly, the stages that the butterfly goes through. So the point is like the egg stage. And when they're eggs, you can keep them that way for years. You can freeze them when you like it, thaw it, and then bring it into the world. The line stage is like a caterpillar. And caterpillars don't last. They're also very mushy. So there's a lot of fragility, how would you say? Like, it's very fragile, this stage. It could break easily. Selflessness is something that breaks very easily. You have to have a lot of motivation, meaning the selflessness is a motivation to carry love from its initial point-like stage of faith into an actual life of love. And that's like what I described before, these countless hours that you have to spend doing for the object of your love. So if you really have strong faith, meaning that the point of faith is very strong, so it would be like Yaakov working for Rachel, and 7 years feel like they're nothing. But you can't say that they were nothing. And you can say, I felt that it wasn't so hard. But 7 years working day and night for the object of your love is a tremendous investment. So the only way you can get through it, the only thing that can motivate you, is selflessness itself. And in fact, that's probably where we understand, that's where Yaakov got his whole concept of selflessness. Why am I saying this? Yaakov's whole system of life is based on bittul, on selflessness. What was his innovation? how do you create a society? That's like the question. Yaakov is going to build a society. He's going to have many children. He's going to build the Jewish people. So how do you, what should be the guiding principle, the one principle that will make this society just and good? Meaning, so what will make it unified? Unity is not the goal, it's a means. It's a means for something great to be revealed through this society or family or whatever it is that I'm building. What is the principle in today's Western world? What makes society great? If it is. But let's say it is. So what is it?
Respect.
Okay. Let's say, put it this way. Okay, you're getting closer to what I'm getting at. If we take the Soviet Union versus the United States in the 80s, right? What caused the Soviet Union to fall apart?
The refuseniks.
That's already. What caused it to fall apart while the United States flourished? What was it that made America great, right? What is that thing? It's a very cliche, type of answer, but I think it's the right answer. I don't know if they believe in that. That's more like an ideological regime, like something that has ideology. There's no real ideology in America except for one. So what does the Declaration of Independence start with? That every person has the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's what's called the American dream, right? That's what it means. What is it saying? It's saying that when you allow people to pursue the ends of who they can be, meaning you give them freedom, you give them life, liberty, apparently for the pursuit of happiness. They're not the same, right? Because the pursuit of happiness is like a goal. It's like something you do. You don't do life and liberty, but you do pursue happiness. So they're not exactly the same level. But that's what made America great. That people could pursue their dream. They could pursue who they are. They could bring themselves, or try to at least discover what their potential is. While in the Soviet Union, the feeling was completely the opposite, that the individual doesn't matter for anything, right? It's a state centered system where it's like, even though they of course were against this, but it's so ridiculous because they were the most fascist out of anybody ever, probably, even though they hated fascism. But they were, in that sense, they were the most fascist because you live basically for the state. You never pursue what you think might be your goals. So what makes most societies great is the power or the ability of the individual to pursue their own self, to be separate, to be recognized as different, to be recognized as having separate rights from other people. And the more you called it respect, but more, it is in a sense, it's a type of respect, it's understanding the borders, meaning the boundaries between individuals. And the more you can respect that, the more it gives the person, as it were, motivation to go and do something with their lives. Except, there's only one small problem. That you've created a society where people are separate. By definition, they have to be distinct and separate from one another. And then when you get to the end of this, and people start remembering that, wait a minute, we're also social beings, and so we need a community. And so at some level, they give up some of their individuality, some of their being different from one another, and then they join together under some kind of communal, collective idea or feeling. I do need Chavi's. Do you guys know where it is? The extension cord. Is she here?
No.
She's not feeling well?
Wait. I once heard it said that Am Yisrael is like a bunch of grapes, separate, like every grape is separate, but together like one bunch.
And what happens when people are separate in the end? So that can't reflect the unity of Hashem. You end up with such individuality, which is not each person reflecting a different aspect of Hashem, but rather it becomes that we have to be separate from each other in order to be who we are, not to reflect something higher. In the end, it's how did somebody say that if you walk on the street in Manhattan and you fall down, tough luck. Okay, because we're busy. Don't bother. I'm busy pursuing my dream. And I don't want to make anybody demonic or terrible, but that if I do stop to help you, you should compensate me for my time. Okay? Because I stopped pursuing my needs in order to help you with yours. I'm not saying everybody is like that, but most people are like that. And it creates a very difficult situation in which the light of Hashem, who is one, the oneness of Hashem, can't appear in such a society. What society was like that? Very affluent, and yet very, very separate to the point where it was forbidden to give charity. Sodom. Right? Because what do Chazal say? They say there are 4 measures in people, 4 different types of people. Haomer sheli sheli v'shelcha shelcha. The person who says, mine is mine and yours is yours. So Chazal say, midah beinonit. This is a median type of person. V'yesh omrim, and there are those who say that this is midat tzedom. This is what Sodom was like. Mine is mine and yours is yours. When there's no involvement, when there's no feeling of solidarity of things being shared, that they're not necessarily mine or yours maybe, then there's, in the end, discord, disharmony. Even if people get along at some level, in the end, they're not together. Rather, they're only together because it suits them at the moment. But the moment that it won't, that'll be the end. And the truth has to be told that a lot of people secretly desire something else, even though they'll never give up what they have. But at some level, they do want to be in a situation where they're living something more communal. There's a lot of romanticism in that. Okay, the romanticism in it is somehow, because really what's the romanticism in it? Because Hashem can't dwell, Hashem's oneness cannot dwell in a place where everything is completely separate. And there's nothing shared, there's nothing together. So You might say, at some level, people who live in New York, so City Hall is shared by everybody, right? The parks are shared by everybody. But really, these things are something that that somebody else takes care of. You don't have to actually contribute to it. And you need something where you're contributing together. That's why you get these community centers, and people clean stuff up together, or they do this project together, whatever, because they need this connection. So that's the normal picture of society. Different levels of how much do we separate each from one another. What did Yaakov try to do? Yaakov, he created a completely different type of society based on a completely different principle that nobody almost ever heard of. It was literally unheard of before he came along. Even Avram Avinu didn't know about this principle. Not the way that Yaakov knew about it. And what was the principle? Selflessness. Selflessness. What does it mean to live in what does it mean to live in a society where selflessness is the motivator? Okay, what kind of society is that? So first of all, before we go to society, let's take our homes. What does it mean to live in a home where the motivator is selflessness? What does life together look like then, right? The life that most people live together is one of a lot of compromise. Why? When do you have to compromise? Because I want something, I'm pursuing my dream, and you're pursuing yours, and it happens to be that we can't pursue them at the same time because there are limited resources, limited time, whatever it is. So now we have to reach a compromise. So what will be the compromise? We'll do a little bit of my thing, a little bit of your thing. But whenever you get into a communal reality, especially in a family, if you try to build it on pursuing dreams, unless there are unlimited resources, things will crash. As long as there are unlimited resources, or the dreams are really small, then eventually things will, crash into one another. People will argue. And that's how children are, because children have no selflessness yet. They don't know how to do that yet. So, when's the last time you heard a child say to their brother or sister, "Oh, you want this? I'm so happy to give it to you." Where can they learn it from? Only from one place. They can learn it from the parents. That if the love between the parents, here again we're talking just about the motivator of the second stage of love, there it has to be selflessness, then the connection is completely different. That's what it means at Shekhinah B'Neim. That's why the two letters that are chosen for the Shekhinah in this case are Yud and Hey. Why Yud and Hey? What's so important about Yud and Hey? Yud and Hey, these Yud and Hey, they're the Yud and Hey in Chochmah. Yud K, that two-letter name, is the holy name of the Sfirah of Chochmah, of Bittul, of selflessness. So when both sides are selfless, meaning, oh, you want to go out tonight to some place, it's my pleasure to accommodate you. And I'm not even accommodating you. Because what am I doing? I'm increasing my selflessness. That's my motivator. That I'm looking for how to be more selfless, less self-gratifying. Then the bond that's created is on its way to love. And that's... So what was Yaakov experiencing these 7 years waiting for Rachel? He was experiencing his selflessness. It doesn't matter that I don't sleep at night. I'm doing all this, in a sense, by the way, because we know Lavan. It's to redeem you from this from this terrible father that you have. It's also part of it.
Marry her and
Marry
then
her.
work. I would have thought Lavan said first work and then you'll get her.
That's how it was with Rachel.
Didn't he marry her
The second,
a
a week later, the second marriage, yes. Okay. But the first marriage, 7 years ago, the truth is, it should have been 7 years for both of them. But settle, it was seven and 7. What was Rachel, what was her selflessness in those 7 years?
Well, the first 7 years
Okay.
or second?
What did she do?
She gave it.
She gave her husband. She didn't want, I mean, her selflessness was like also for him in the sense of you worked so hard and now it's sort of like, I'm sure that's what Lavan told him. Look, either Leah gets married to him or he walks away with nothing. So you guys make up your mind. So they made up their minds. They said it can't be that he sacrificed so much for me, says Rachel, and that I won't sacrifice myself for him. So that he's an old man already. He was 70, 78. What was he when he started?
So you're saying like his selflessness inspired, and selflessness does that, it inspires other selflessness in the people around.
But more importantly, it inspires the divine presence to come down in between two people that are selfless. To say it another way, why do we connect this so much with wisdom? Because you can learn Torah as just information. A lot of people learn Torah as just information.
Intellectual exercise.
Yeah, it's a very strong, it's a very good intellectual exercise, one of the best. But you can also learn Torah as an exercise in selflessness. Why? Because we all have ideas about how the world's supposed to work. We all have ideas about what's right. If a person is learning Torah in order to, another way to selflessness, bitul, is to nullify my understanding, to say, I don't know. Moshe Rabbeinu, he's the epitome of selflessness. He's the epitome of bitul, of self-nullification. What's his favorite phrase? Eini yodea. I don't know. I don't know. More than anybody else, he's able to say this. Why? Because he's the epitome of wisdom. The epitome of wisdom, says Shlomo HaMelech in another vein, is somebody who can learn from anybody. Ezehu chacham halomed mikol adam. How do you get to that level? You can learn from anybody. You have to be tremendously self-nullified. And to feel that whatever is being told to me is, even if it's against what I think, there's wisdom in it. When a person encounters Torah in that way, and he encounters other people's wisdom or opinions in that way, Hashem shines upon him. It's not the letters that will make him smarter. It's not the letters that if I had more free time and I read more texts than somebody else, that's what made me a Talmid Chacham. A Talmid Chacham is a student of Chachma. That's what it really means, Talmid Chacham. So what does it mean? That I'm studying selflessness. And the more a person feels selfless, or willing to nullify himself in learning, every time it's something new, it's entirely new, it's a feeling of freshness in what I'm learning, then Hashem comes down and informs him himself. Mm-hmm. The infinite comes into him. That's what we say, that it's the Shekhinah between the couple is not just a good relationship. It's a feeling that there's infinity here. That we filled the space between us with something that's beyond the world. It's supernatural. It's not regular. But to get to that, to get to the supernatural, to get to what's beyond understanding, beyond knowledge, beyond the regular vein of understanding things, you have to exercise selflessness. When it comes to learning Torah, that means that I don't come saying I know, but rather I don't know. So now you teach me, Hashem. And the more that I can feel, how did Baal Shem Tov say this? He said that every time a person comes to learn, he should feel that he's like a dog lapping at the sea, like picking up a few drops. But there's a vast ocean here. So as much as I've ever done before, it doesn't count for anything. Why? Because I want to reach that stage of selflessness. So if a person comes and says, hears the words, honey, can you do the dishes? He says, but I did the dishes yesterday. So what is that? It's like a person who came to learn Torah and he said, but I already learned this yesterday, so what's the point? There's nothing here. There's nothing to be gained here. But of course there is what to gain. If you make the selflessness into the thing that you're pursuing, not happiness, but rather selflessness. Happiness is joy. It's a bina. It's a feeling of being. But selflessness, chokhmah, is a feeling of not being. If that's what you pursue, then the infinite can dwell. Of course, this is like we said, it's the most fragile part of the whole process, the whole developmental process of love. That it requires a ton of selflessness, and for extended periods of time, maybe always. But what is the result? The result is love itself. And love itself means togetherness. That you're no longer alone. Okay? Chibur, we call it chibur. Because that's what everybody's looking for in the end. What am I looking for? That I won't be alone. Is it possible to not be alone? Somebody comes and says, how could you not be alone? Everybody's alone. Doesn't matter if you're married, if you have 10 kids, you're still alone. He says, no. You're right, in terms of the body, I'll always be separate and alone. But in terms of the soul, since Hashem is one, if I can bring that infinite aspect of Hashem, that oneness of Hashem, into my reality, then I'm no longer alone. But again, it depends on the motivator being selflessness, the middle stage being the selflessness. If the motivator, if the engine, right, the engine house here, isn't selflessness, then you foster separateness and being aloneness. Okay. You get solitary instead of solidarity. When I'm selfless, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm yet together. It's not yet the togetherness. Because being selfless is almost like there's only the other person. There's no me, but there's only the other person. A lot of people resent this. They can't stand this. That's why people stay. That's why they don't mature in love. They stay in the same place. They stay in the faith. Everybody believes in love. Right? That's what it's called, like in music or in popular song and movies and whatever. They believe in the power of love, but they can't actually use the power of love, which is selflessness. Because what do you believe in? You believe that in the end, really, what is it when people say, I believe in love? They say, I believe that in the end everything is one. That I'm not alone, that I'm part of something greater. What is the part of something? I'm part of Hashem Echad, I'm part of that. But usually they can only believe it, but they don't know how to get from that stage of believing in it to the final stage. Again, in the belief you only get a glimpse of the future. But how do I actually make that into the reality? That they don't know how to traverse the tremendous span of time between. How big is the span of time? The span of time is every moment, in the present. And that's another important thing about this, that we're going from future to present to past. And love is actually in the past. What do we mean to say that?
Something that you worked.
That it was always here. It's to come to a recognition. Love is really that togetherness that is what people feel when there's love. That I'm loved and that I love and so on. That feeling of being together was always here. It's suddenly a feeling that's why when people pass away, they suddenly at one moment, like their life flashes before them. Why? Because the entire past suddenly becomes full of love. They see the light. What's that light that they see? Love. That's what they see. They just don't know what to call it.
But it's like.
But they say, I feel.
Isn't it like they're on their way up?
So they see the entire past. Why do we see the past?
It's not because they're going up, it's from the past.
No. Because they're losing their self, because I'm detaching from the body. What gives me my sense of separateness is my body. The neshama doesn't necessarily feel that way. It can, but it doesn't have to. Its normal state is dafka to feel that it's together, that it's. So, as the body, as the soul detaches from the body, the psyche detaches from the body. You see this light. What is it? That's the light of togetherness. That's Or HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the light of Hashem. The light of love. That's what it is. And because when you achieve love, when you come to the final stage, which we're calling love, when it manifests in love, it's actually it corresponds to the entire past. We said the faith, believing in love, is like a glimpse of the future. Selflessness is what's required every single moment of the present. And when you go through the present that way, what you get suddenly is that the entire past was always full of love. That I was never alone. What?
How come you didn't recognize it then?
Because you didn't work with selflessness in this world.
Right.
You have to work. But the moment that you work with selflessness, suddenly you realize that nobody ever tried to harm me. I was never alone here. Hashem never left me. I was never in a state of being cast away. That's why they want to go towards that light, because what are they suddenly feeling? They're suddenly feeling the thing they were looking for their whole lives. Love. That's what I was looking for.
It's the neshama's recognition.
Okay, the neshama always can recognize it, but to recognize it in life, I need selflessness. I need the bitun. And if I don't have the bitun, then I can't. But the beautiful thing is that it works retroactively. That suddenly everything is healed. It heals everything. I was never alone. There was never such a thing. I thought I was, and I thought that everybody was against me, and I was this, was that. But if a person works with selflessness enough, then he comes to realize that it was nothing. It wasn't at all what I thought it was. Suddenly everything is relieved. Suddenly there's a feeling of, wow, I belong. That's what love in the end is this feeling that I belong, that I'm...
Some people achieve that tzaddikim while they are alive.
I don't know, I feel... let's say when a child comes home to a place where they feel loved. So what do they feel? They feel that they've returned to where they belong.
Embrace.
They feel belonging, right? Not longing, but belonging. Like this is my place. This is my space. Here I'm atuf. Like here I'm embraced. So when there's love, that's exactly what people feel. They feel like they belong. You don't have to be a tzaddik to get to that level. It's like every place that if I feel loved, so that's the place where I feel loved. How do I get there? A lot of selflessness.
But the child is not.
The child is not. The parents give it, obviously. It's the parents that are the selfless, and they're the ones who try to, right, foster it in the home. By the way, this is. I'm a sucker for this. I always fall in the other direction, which is I get really upset and I talk to my wife for hours. Why is it that they don't love each other? Why don't they why don't they act like they love each other? So she says it's not true. It's simply not true. A lot of times they do. And some of the times they don't. or a lot of the time they don't. But it's not that, still they're at a very early stage. It's very hard for somebody who's in those stages of life. It's also hard for somebody who's in later stages of life to embrace selflessness as the motivator for life. That this is what makes Hashem dwell here. This is what brings the Shekhinah between the husband and wife. This feeling of selflessness, that whatever is needed by my spouse, I give selflessly. I have no problem giving as much as is needed.
So how would that work with clients? Like really when you say, or children, or people who are not feeling that?
They
not
feel
feeling like
nobody
they
loves
need
me,
the
right?
love they
Nobody-
need and they want and they're supposed to get, and
Yeah.
they do this and that and that and this, and like look at the situation. Like they're not going to have it. I mean, if they're in such a love impoverished state, they're not going to want to hear like, just you be selfless and it will.
Why? You tell them the story. Everybody understands. It's not so difficult. The famous story from the Rebbe that some girl who was in a pneumonia in a boarding school wrote to him and said, "I can't stand it. Nobody cares about me. Everybody hates me," which is all demyonis. It's all imagination in the end.
Right.
So he said, "So do something every day. Do something for somebody. Okay? Do something for somebody every day." And that's turned it around. Why? Not because I'm winning over friends. Because selflessness is the intermediate stage. And it's every moment has its act of selflessness. I can't do it, okay, I'll be selfless for a month and everything will be okay for the next year. It's a constant, in the same way that when a person learns, by the way, that's one of the most incredible things. The most difficult thing in learning in Torah is to do chazara, is to do a repetition. Why? So Chazal say, "En bet midrash bli chidush." There's no such thing as learning again, even the same sugya that you've learned, the same issue that you've learned however many times, and that there's no chiddush at all. But clearly, there's not enough chiddush. Because if there was enough, and a person would feel that the repetition is really learning something that's so chadash, it's so new, it's like I'm not even learning something old. So obviously nobody would have a problem with repetitions. It would be easy. Why doesn't it happen? Because there's not enough selflessness in the learning. Meaning that when I'm accruing information, I'm trying to accumulate more and more information. And let's say I just learned this yesterday, so it's boring to go over it again because it's just the same information again. But if my learning is such that I want the infinite to appear in the letters, and the infinite is new every time it shows up, okay, then a repetition is not something old. It's the biggest gift, which is feeling, like I said, that the past is suddenly filled with the new understanding that I have. It's the ability to look into the past and feel something I didn't feel before about it. And so it's not a repetition. It's really renewing the past.
The past learning.
The past learning.
Yeah.
The same is true in relationships. It's old. People feel that we've gotten to a certain state where we just okay, we're comfortable together. Whatever we do, we know where not to step on each other, and that's it. And it gets old. Why? Because selflessness has to find and break new ground. You're not selfless anymore. What you've learned is how to stay off each other's toes. That's not selflessness. If you really want to come to a renewal of the feeling of the relationship, then find something new to be selfless in. Be selfless all the time, about new things, not about things that are old things. And then the infinite light dwells inside. But if you don't do that, then the feeling, well, I have to go, is one of, this is old, this is just a repetition, we're just going through the motions again and again and again.
So selflessness is the chidush, really, like a new...
That's exactly what it means. What is selflessness? It's a yesh mi'ayin. It's a new thing that comes into the world. And we have the power to affect it. That's what's so amazing about this. That's what Yaakov taught us. Yaakov built a society based on selflessness. It's a tremendous chiddush. That to go from stage to stage, you have to be more selfless. Very interesting. We'll finish with this. That people describe the Sanhedrin, or the form of government the Jews have, or had ideally, as a meritocracy. Meaning that how do you become part of the Sanhedrin? You're supposed to be smarter than everybody else, right? You're supposed to be one of the top 120 thinkers, and those are the people that rule us. I beg to differ, because you're not allowed to live in a city whose heads are Talmidei Chachamim. That's not for you. Because they're in their world, they're in their philosophical world. They live there, and they'll never take care of the garbage, because they can't even understand that there's garbage out there.
Indeed.
They didn't. It's forbidden. It's halacha. So what was the merit there? The merit was not that they were well versed in all matters of philosophy and thought and so on. Rather, that they were the greatest selfless, they were greatest in their selflessness. There was nobody great, so Hashem appeared through them. So their opinion could have some divine flavor to it. And so to solve problems, you can also use rational means and what's the best method and so on and so forth. But we know that even when you choose the best and most logical way to do things, they don't always get done properly. In the same way that we talk about counseling, that it's not necessarily about knowing the answer. It's about what are you inspired to say. And that inspiration comes from selflessness. It doesn't come from how much I know. You have to know. I'm not saying that they don't have to know. You have to know as much as you can. But in the end, are you willing to throw it away? And to say, Hashem, you tell me what? That's like how a person learns. Of course I know everything it says in the Shulchan Aruch. But can I open it now on the first page and say, like I've never learned before? What Hashem do you have to teach me? And when that's the attitude, then the result is that they do Dvar Hashem, that they say the words of Hashem. So the merit is, meaning the meritocracy here is, are you the best at being selfless? Are you the best at nullifying yourself? And when something is built on self-nullification, then there's a feeling of belonging to everybody that's underneath.
But when we have a client and they have a problem, so we're supposed to check whether we have that same problem. But then put it aside.
Even to see where the same problem is in me requires a lot of inspiration. Because usually I don't have exactly the same problem. Otherwise I'm very limited. You know what it's like. It's like that everybody can write one book. You can their autobiography. That's what they always say. The writers start with what they know. What's the thing they know the most? Their own lives. The question is, can you write a second book? To write the second book, you have to go beyond yourself. Then you have to live somebody else's. You have to see something else. To do that, you need selflessness. So that's good.
It's a really beautiful thing, though, because it's the practice of like getting out of the ego. I mean, it's implicit in what you're saying.
Without mentioning the ego, you can say this.
Like you said,
you don't have to.
The ego at all, but that's like.
On the contrary, you could say that this is the greatest self-fulfillment that I have. It's the most egotistical thing, if you want. Selflessness is the most egotistical thing, really, in the end. Why? Because it builds a real ego, the one that is inspired by Hashem, the one that is godly, that you feel that what you have in front of you. Nachon. It's the more. It's mamash hamtaka. It's already like sweetening. Okay.
Thank you.